Thanks to our sponsors Renault, the Renault Capture, the versatile compact family SUV.
You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for life.
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is what tips the scale. Just remember that, lad.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Now, come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back to Eden, and now they're really roaring. And I can tell you that there won't be a cow milk in County Clare for at least a week.
Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show in association with Renault. Actually, better start that again, come on. Hello everyone, you're very welcome to the Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show in association with Renault. My name is Paul Rouse and I'm joined by the former Armagh footballer Oisín McConville, by the former Kerry footballer Bryan Sheehan, and by the sports editor of the Irish Examiner Tony Leen. It's late here on Sunday night as we record this review of the weekend's 4 football quarterfinals. We can reduce the story of this weekend to 2 basic facts. On Saturday, July the 9th, Galway and Derry will meet at 5:30 p.m. in the first All-Ireland football semi-final. The second fact is that on the following day, Sunday, July the 10th, Dublin will play Kerry in the second semi-final at 3:30 p.m. But facts tell only a very small part of the story of this weekend. And they certainly don't do justice to what it was like to be in Croke Park today and indeed on Saturday. I enjoyed the Galway and Armagh match more than any other match for a very, very long time. And Oisín, I have to start with you, and I want to start in injury time of normal time. What were you thinking when your nephew, Rian O'Neill, was placing the ball for that free, which he needed to get to bring the game to extra time?
I panicked a little bit first, Paul, because Aidan Falker tried to kick it to Ethan Rafferty, and I thought this is probably as good a chance as we get. I was afraid that Goldrick, if we had a couple of plays, would have actually blown it up. So I thought the best eventuality and situation for Armagh was to set it down and have a go. I think he'll kick 7 out of 10 of them. I think he never struggles for distance. I think adrenaline kicks in. I think situation kicks in, and if he misses it, it's probably not going to perturb him too much. He's just that sort of, well, when I say he's just that sort of character, these misses hurt everybody, but I think Bryan might be able to tell you as well. Like, I got to a stage where, personally, where when I took free kicks, I felt as if I had made peace with the fact that I was the right person to hit them, that I was the best person to hit them, and also that I was going to miss an odd one here and now. And you try to reduce how many important ones you miss, but like you start to walk through it in your mind, and you think, right, for every 10 free kicks I'm hitting, I'm probably scoring 9. Now, it was a very difficult free kick. I heard him Fitzmaurice,
and it was chaos at that stage. The last 5 minutes was 2 goals.
It was chaos, and I didn't think Rian had one of his better games. I didn't think he was massively in the game, even though he had lots of good moments. But he seemed very calm around everything that he was doing. So I thought it was okay that way. He wasn't really involved in anything controversial or anything like that. And I just thought, that's a perfect opportunity to set it down and kick it. And your mentality, as I say, as a free taker, changes. It has to be a certain mentality, and that's why only certain players can step up and hit those in big moments. So I think his mentality, was that, like, if I miss it, I miss it. But that 7 or 8 times out of 10, he's going to kick that. It's a monster kick. It's a monster kick, and it's into a slight wind as well. And Croke Park.
At that point, so I was sitting in the Hogan stand down under the RTE box, and when the first goal went in, you gave a kind of a gentle wave of the program in the air. I looked up. When the second goal went in, I think, Brian, you might have seen this as well. You when you got somewhat excited, Oisín, and there seemed to be the need for technological refurbishment of the studio and of yourself when it was finished. And when the free went over the bar that time, I actually thought you could have ended up beside us in the holding stand. It was one of the most spectacular 5 minutes of football. And in the middle of it, Shane Walsh, who was a really, really very good footballer, did an extraordinary thing down right in front of us where he had possession. Coming down along the sideline, he had a simple down the line ball to give, which I think would have put Fina. I'm not sure exactly who he would have put in, but he sent the ball across the field and he gave it back to Armagh.
It's the soccer one when you see the boys taking the ball into the corner and boys start taking lumps out of the person who's taking it into the corner. And I thought that Galway had a great opportunity to run down the clock, but Armagh were chasing like their lives depended on it. I suppose in many ways it did. And I couldn't believe it when he kicked the ball over and started to drift out towards, I think, I can't remember who, one of the Mackins maybe, I think could have been Conor Mackin that ended up with the ball. But that just gives you that one more chance, and then you have to make the most of it, you know. But it was a really poor decision on Shane Walsh's part.
But that's something that I mentioned as well, I think, last week, or with Galway. The one thing I was concerned about them in the Connacht final game in the Connacht Championship game against Mayo, they were cruising, and all of a sudden they were getting a couple of frees here and there, and they just kicked it away. They were blowing him into the corner, and I was on about game management, and this is where I thought that. And if you look at the last 3 games they played, their game management when they've been up 5 or 6 points has been very, very poor. Do you know what I mean? They should not be letting a team into the game like that, especially when you're both inside Croke Park. If you have to, land inside the square. Paul Conroy, for me, should have been sitting inside in the square there for the last 5-10 minutes of that game when you're 6 points up, because the only way Armagh were going to come into that was a goal, and they were obviously going to go route one, even if they were going to run through. He's a big man. You take your punishment. You just at all costs don't come through the middle. But even like that with Shane Walsh, I thought go at your man. Simply go at him when you're free, because it's that stage of the game. You can't take him down because you know it's going to be free. You know they're going to go back up again. It was the case for me. Just go at your man when you're free. He can't touch you. Take him on, kick it over the bar, kill the ball. The big thing for me was either kill the ball, even if you put it wide. At least you're facing the kick out. But as you say, by keeping the ball in play, it allowed Armagh to go back down the field, and the ref gave them that opportunity to go back down the field and give them one opportunity. But as I said, it's our game management in the last 3 games, between the Mayo game in the Connacht Championship, Roscommon in the Connacht final, and again today. They really need to sort it out going to the last 10 minutes of the game.
We have to give Galway credit as well, though, Brian, don't we? Because I think it's fair to say that Galway in over for a stretch of years have conspired to lose a lot of tight games, and there have been questions about Galway's backbone, if we're really straight up about it, when it comes down to these games. But they kept coming back today. I mean, they won it 3 times, lost it 3 times, and we're still there at the end.
Look, absolutely, don't get me wrong. They have come an awful long way, and I know, even I think Partly Dry said it in his comments after the game today, that that team had been getting a lot of slack over their performances and not being able to see the games out, or not being able to win big games. And in fairness, they won a cracker of a game today, and I think that will stand them. It absolutely will stand them, and a lot of credit is due to them, even in extra time, from when they were after what happened in normal time, coming into extra time and concede a goal again in extra time. They came back down the field and had the composure to get another goal. So yeah, there is massive credit due to Galway. There absolutely is. But again, I'm just going to make the point that if there's something they have to work on, I think they're going to have to work on seeing out these games when they're like in all the games they were 6 points up. I mean, they should not be letting a team back into a game with 6 points up.
Yeah.
Tony, you were in the corridors afterwards, after the game, between the games, and then after the Kerry Mayo game. Was there much discussion about the row? Was there much discussion over, in particular, the choice of the 2 particular players who got red carded between normal time and extra time?
Well, there'll be no discussion, Paul, on that. Certainly in the initial phase, because everyone's going to kick the touch. I mean, it's probably the one that's going to have the longest lifespan, those incidents. But you'd like to think that, and I would certainly like to think that in terms of memory, that the football will actually override what happened at the end of normal time. I saw it happening, and I saw it happening before it happened. I knew it was going to happen. I mean, I do think that there is some blame attaching still to authorities for allowing teams to come out and go down the same tunnel. I remember one of the questions I asked the famous Frank Murphy in Páirc Uí Chaoimh was what changes they'd make to the tunnel when they redeveloped Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and he actually said for that very specific reason. They actually were going to have 2 points of entry and 2 points of exit. Obviously, if it was the only game in Croke Park, they'd have been on the opposite side of the field. The two lads know exactly like where I'm talking about. There is just those steps down on the Cusack sand side. But everybody was aware that they were going to be going down, whether it was at the end of a game or whatever. Should there have been a situation where you were trying to hold one team back? These are all and, if, buts and maybes at this stage. But I looked over two Armagh players. Like, obviously, Armagh were wound up like a clock by the end. Obviously, Rian O'Neill had just kicked an outrageous free to actually bring the team to extra time. They'd, after scoring 2 goals in extra time, they were actually up to 90. One of the Armagh guys went over, buffeted Damien Comer in the back. Another Armagh guy came in with him. Comer, in fairness to him, took some punishment today, by the way. Took some punishment over the 70 minutes. And people might
Gave
say,
a bit himself too, I have to say.
Well able to take it, but took a lot of punishment. He reacted. Another Galway guy jumped in, and that's all it took. In ordinary circumstances, it might have calmed down, but the whole tension at that moment was at fever pitch. We'd just seen an extraordinary game of football that had already gone, remember, 80 minutes before we even got to extra time. I mean, there are so many frustrations for Armagh tonight. I'm being honest with you. The least of them tonight is going to be the trouble at the end of normal time. With 8 minutes and 51 seconds gone in the allotted 8 minutes of injury time, Jamar Hall kicks the ball over the bar, dodges inside, kicks the ball over the bar. Suddenly, 3:18 to 2:20, Armagh ahead. At that stage, Oisín, I actually genuinely did think they are going to close it out. Here's the very interesting thing that somebody texted me about, I'd say about that moment. And I just like your thoughts on it. At that moment right there, Armagh were gone a point ahead in an epic game after an epic comeback. Galway had the restart. Armagh had a choice. Did they actually press up? Actually press up really high? The clock was done. What did Armagh do? Everybody just turned south and ran straight back and set up in their own half. Now, it's all very easy and wise right now, but McGeaney is such a shrewd person. They set something up. Nothing happens by chance in that Armagh setup. I mean, in fairness, I know McGeaney, and I know not as well as obviously the other man on this call, but I know that they are set up to within an inch of their lives. I am really surprised, Paul, that they actually gave an entire half of the field with literally seconds remaining. You would have thought at that stage, do the famous Dublin trick, what they did to Kerry and Mayo in the past. Literally collapse on top of fellas from the kick out. Make sure that if you were giving a free, you were stopping the clock again. I genuinely thought it was that little tiny shaft of light, because don't get me wrong, over the piece, for me, Galway were the better side. Galway deserved to win the game. It was a very good, even game for 50 minutes. And then after that, Galway were the better side. They blew it and they recovered it. But there was that shaft of light for Armagh to make an All-Ireland semi-final and not to make Oisín feel even sicker than he does already. That was that moment for me. to actually just kill the game, collapse the play, burn down the clock, and give David Coldrick the situation where after 60 seconds of that nonsense, he was going to blow the final whistle and Armagh win by a point.
The funny thing is that if you remember, Tony, that kick out was actually delayed as well.
It was.
Yes.
Because I can't remember who it was down with cramp for Galway. And I thought I couldn't believe it when I seen us not pressing the kickouts, because that was the one thing that had really stood to us. But I understand. I also understand that, you know, when you're in the lane, you just go, listen, we will be able to hold out. Because Armagh had a couple of passage of play in extra time where Galway, you know, kept manoeuvring the ball to a certain point, and Armagh were able to just have that extra bit of patience and see them out and turn the ball over, get back up the top end of the field. But I felt it was a mistake at the time, and it turned out it was a mistake. But I can also see I can visualize me on the sideline going, right, everybody halfway lane, let's go, let's get them to try and break us down. So as much as I felt it was that's probably something like I would do.
It was an amazing point. I think that should be said. It was an incredible score from Killian McDade. First of all, Jamar Hall's a brilliant score. But you'd almost...
Jamar Hall's actually was a goal chance.
It was a goal chance. It was goal. Although I do see
he probably thought a point would do it.
He thought a point would do it. And if you were Armagh, they first of all had Killian McDade, and he managed to get himself free, and how he managed to still have the energy to do it was incredible. But it was an unbelievable point. And you know, you'd almost give it as a percentage shot. I'm not saying you would give it as a percentage, you would almost give it as a percentage shot. So that's the risk reward on it, Brian.
Can I, Paul, ask Oisín a question? It can't be a coincidence the number of agricultural, some people would call them, I would call it anything but, high balls that were put in at the edge of the Galway square. Kieran Donaghy was someone who carved a reputation all the way back from 2006 from profiting from stuff on the edge of the square. Do you think he or Armagh identified a weakness that Conor Gleeson was suspect under that kind of stuff? Because anything that went in there with height actually ended up in the back of the net. And you'd actually say it. The only reason I'm suggesting it might have been an act of desperation and not tactic is that they didn't do it until the last 10 minutes of the game. So, but it just seemed as well, Oisín, to be too consistent in the latter stages to be coincidental. And I just think with Donaghy in there, I'm just wondering, do you think it was something or not?
I'd say it would have been a source of frustration that when Armagh played with Rian and Turbid in for most of the second half together, that we didn't kick more ball in. And we just seemed like we now can get enough opportunity. But the thing I would say is that, do you see the ball that Ethan Rafferty kicked into Rian right at the end? He won it and he fisted it across the goals.
Yeah.
That's what Kieran Donaghy is bringing.
Yeah,
the other two, to be fair, one was dropped short from Rian, and the other one was just a ball.
It was a route in.
It was a hopeful ball in. But see the one where Ethan Rafferty kicks it with the outside of his boot, Rian goes up, collects it, and that's pre-planned. That's worked on. That's And the other thing about that one is, you probably don't even want to be using that. You want to be using that when you're 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, or you're even 3-on-2 against. But when you have that many bodies in there, somebody going up and winning it clean is unlikely. But Armagh were able to do that. So yeah, absolutely, it's pre-planned. But I think on some of those occasions it was just pure desperation.
But I thought at the start of the game, especially the first 10-15 minutes, Armagh did a lot of kicking the ball, and I think it worked for them. Now, obviously, then I think Galway kind of got the grips of the game a small bit from the point of view we're probably just that bit rusty, and I think Armagh then found it a bit difficult. Or either Armagh stopped kicking it in, or Galway kind of got their defensive structure in place and started getting more bodies back, and Armagh didn't stop kicking the ball. I just thought the first 15 minutes of the game, when Armagh were kicking, they were doing very well. They were on top, and all of a sudden then, once Galway found their feet, I'm just surprised that Armagh didn't try and get up the field that bit quicker and try and get that long kick going into the boys inside, because, as you say, look, when the ball did go in, they caused havoc in there. But it's just, I think Galway kind of got to Armagh, and they kind of they just stopped Armagh from kicking. Armagh stopped kicking the ball, and Armagh, I think, had very little in midway through the second half. They just seemed to lacked ideas of how to break Galway down.
I think Armagh tried to thread the Avon needle with some of them balls, early on. In fact, some of them were just completely not on, yet still sort of half worked out for us. But I don't know.
You're very deflated, Oisín. You feel
no, it's not. I'm just
a chance gone.
Yeah, but I'm just in tatters. I'm in tatters.
Why? What do you mean?
Just the emotion of it. I just couldn't handle it. I just couldn't handle it
because the crowd from Armagh, like, it was such an occasion, right? And the crowd from Armagh was unreal in the ground 20 minutes before the game. It was just this. The place had been tangoed. Like, it was just orange everywhere around the place, and it was a really wonderful atmosphere. And but it feels like there was a huge chance gone missing here.
No, absolutely, there's a huge chance gone missing, and to be honest, by the time it had got to extra time, at the end of extra time, I was done with that game. I was finished. I couldn't give anymore. I couldn't give the game anymore. And look, the players were absolutely out on their feet, and the amount of players was cramping was something abnormal. I don't want to be unkind to the Armagh players, but I think we got to the stage where we had just completely run out of bodies. I think there was some of those guys who ended up on the pitch way ahead of their time, as far as, I would say that, 2 years down the line, some of those guys would be fit for Croke Park and what everything that an All-Ireland quarterfinal would entail. But some of it was some of the players who come on, I'd say, were way ahead of schedule, and you probably could see that. I think just purely and simply, it was a body thing. I think the 4 Armagh players that have been out, Kieran Macken come back, didn't look as sharp, obviously. Tiernan Kelly, Oisín O'Neill and Nair Grimley were huge misses in an area where, we were struggling at different stages, and that was between the 265s. That's what I felt. I thought at one stage we were way out of it between those two areas.
Well, can I ask a quick question there? Again, and this intrigues me so much, and it's great, Oisín, that you're on the show and we have this insight. I mean, I think Rian O'Neill is a freak of an athlete. I think he's a good footballer. I don't think he's the finished article by any means, but I would certainly, if I was Armagh, be building a game plan around him. I was watching him an awful lot today, and he was going away from the play a lot. He was creating diversions a lot. He was creating lanes for other players a lot, which is all very fine and dandy and laudable and everything like that. But I'm not sure Armagh, for me, got the best out of Rian O'Neill today. And I just wonder, would you explain to me what the thought process is there? It almost seemed, and I don't want to be derogatory in saying this, it almost seemed a small bit of kind of Mayo with Aidan O'Shea, kind of like, will we put him there? Will we bring him out? Will we get him to do decoys? Will we throw him in at the edge of the square? Do you think that they got the most out of him today? And I appreciate asking you that is slightly unfair.
No, there's absolutely no problem with asking me that. A lot of people looked at his performance against Donegal and thought, this is it. This guy has arrived on scene, finished article, all those sort of things. Loads and loads of plaudits, 1-7 from play, whatever it was. I actually enjoyed his performance against Tyrone more because it was more mature, because Rian's going to be targeted. He's not going to be in the ball as much, and therefore when he is on the ball, really good things have to happen. But in order for good things to happen, he has to be more patient. So he might have to pop the ball once or twice at the start of the game. He might have to, he might have to make that run play somebody else in, that sort of thing. It's a very interesting question, Tony, and you know why it's a very interesting question? Because I looked at Shane Walsh today, and I thought, I didn't think Shane Walsh was in the top of his game today either.
No.
me
Every
either.
time you get the ball,
He was not.
shoved 3 Armagh players into it, and that's how they ended up getting that goal at the end as well. Sucked 3 players in, and I think Armagh thought, listen, do you know what I mean? Rian's not going to do the damage that he did the last day. But you know what we have? We have the Aidan Nugents, we have the Rory Grugans, we have the Stephen Campbells. You know, we have all these guys who can do damage while they're trying to protect him. And when they're doing damage, that might free Rian up a little bit. And I think that was some of the thinking behind the way Rian played. And I think the other thing is that I think at this stage, he's trusted that much. He's still a very, very young lad, and he's captain or vice captain, joint captain. And I think a lot of the decisions that he's making on the field, he's trusted to make on the field. I think there's a couple of players in that field who you will accept turnovers. That makes sense. That you will accept somebody kicking the ball when maybe you think it's not 100% on, but he tries to tread the eye of a needle with a pass, and if it's cut out, it's cut out. And I don't think he's one of the players who's going to be pulled up on that. So I think a lot of the time he's making the decision for where he plays. When I say that, I mean in game time. A lot of work being done off the pitch to decide, where's the best place for you to be. I just felt in the second half he spent too much time in the full forward line, considering there wasn't enough ball going in. And I think we could have done more damage from deeper. But I do think that Armagh, one of the things that Armagh said to themselves was, listen, Kelly's probably the best defender these guys have. If we can keep him out of the game, it'll give us loads and loads of traction for the other lads.
I think that's a really important point, Oisín, because Sean Kelly, he's an excellent footballer. And Galway, Pádraig Joyce, John Divilly, Cian O'Neill, they've constructed a really fine footballing team there, and Galway are getting better. And I think Brian's point is a really good point. Galway were 6 points up in Mayo, and were comfortably better on that day, and nearly they lurched over the line in the end. They were well better than Roscommon, 6 points again, better than things. There were 6 points ushing up on Roscommon 2 minutes, or on Armagh today, 2 minutes into injury time. Like that, Galway are a serious team here, and there's a pathway for Galway now to an All-Ireland final, which is wide open.
There's no disputing the fact, and I agree with the lads. I think Galway were well worth the victory today, but they did everything in their power to mess that up, in 8 minutes of football, and I think. The thing that would worry me about Galway is that there seems to be a lot of lapses in concentration. There seems to be little lapses during the game, like they didn't start the game really, really well. They had a flat period in the second half, and then right at the end of the game, there was even that little lapse, for the goal in injury time. And so there's little lapses, and you just won't get away with it from now on. They got away with it today, but you just won't get away with it from now on. But they're a team that are improving. I like their athleticism. I like the fact today, and going back to Tony's point, I like the fact today that I thought Armagh did okay on Walsh. When people say you blot somebody out of the game, I think you can limit somebody's contribution. Somebody like Walsh, somebody like Comer, but you're not going to completely take them out of the game, and you have to be accepting of that.
Yeah, Finnerty as well.
Yeah, but but the point I'm trying to make is that Finnerty and Matthew Tierney stood up, and in that situation, that's what you need. And when they were standing up, gives Walsh a chance to get himself into the game then, because you're not as clued into Walsh all of a sudden. You're not as clued into Comer. You're thinking, do I need to switch my best man marker on to Finnerty? He's got 3 points from play. Tierney has 2 points from 11. Do I need to, does somebody else need to go to him? And all of a sudden it starts to get you thinking. So, and then you have Conroy and McDaid with a performance that I knew he was going well, I picked them out before the game, but I didn't see that coming. And you're right with that last kick. The intent that showed was remarkable.
It was.
I'm just looking here, Paul, at the program. They got a scoring contribution from everybody from number 7 up to 15. And they got, from their starting forwards, they got 115 from their starting forwards. Plus Rian O'Neill, I think, got a point when he came on as well, actually. So you could actually say 160.
Yeah.
So, like, that is some return. And it took actually Paul Conroy quite a bit of time to get into the game. I mean, like, Paul Conroy is very much seen as the talisman. But Killian McDade, like, I think, was he the man of the match? Did they give him man of the match?
Yeah.
I think they did.
Yeah.
So there is a nice balance there. I have to say, like, I mean, I've seen Matthew Tierney quite a bit over the. I remember Brian when he won I think it was they won an All Ireland intermediate with Oak Gerard a couple of years ago, and I remember seeing him then and thinking to myself, but I think Rob Finnerty is another player that's come on. We know about Johnny Heaney. Like, they're a serious balanced side, and I know it's, you know, you said it there, Paul. Like, I mean, there's a clear pathway to an All Ireland final. I'm not convinced in my head yet, because I've seen Galway flatter to deceive so many times in the more recent years. But I am just saying that an All-Ireland final place is there for them now. That's what I'm saying. I'm not convinced that I wouldn't be ruling Derry out of that semi-final, but I do think Galway would go into it now as favourites.
I'm not convinced about any of these teams. I don't know.
It's amazing. It's amazing after a weekend of football. You can actually make
right.
it.
Oisín is right. There's question marks over everything that's left, and there was question marks, to be honest with you. I'm just trying to think. Did any of the 8 teams go in today without any question marks over them? Like the reason there was 71.5. What did I say? It was 71,500 people in Croke Park today was because of Galway Armagh. It wasn't because of Kerry Mayo.
Yeah.
I think, and there's because obviously Armagh are a very well supported team, but I genuinely feel the football supporting public was crying out for a game of football.
Agreed.
And they knew they were going to get that from Galway and Armagh.
Was there anyone else on the plane with you coming up, Brian, or were you on your own?
Pretty much on my own, to be honest. They were coming up in the cars today.
It was basically a private jet.
Private jet.
Yeah. No, but in fairness, like I couldn't get over the amount of Armagh supporters that was there today, and I genuinely think that atmosphere that was there today fed into that game. Because I don't care what you say, when you're aside there and you're the players, you feed off that. You feed off the excitement. You feed off the atmosphere. Obviously, it takes the players to put in the effort and put in the intensity into the game and bringing the game to a pace to get the crowd excited, but the crowd give it back to it as well. And if you compare that to the second game,
the second game by Mayo, Mayo's supporters have been unbelievable for 10 years in pulling that team forward, and they're feeding off each other. And the second game was devoid of atmosphere for long stretches.
Is there an issue there, lads, with James Horn and the Mayo supporters?
I think Oisín, there is a small hint. I don't know, is it specifically James or his tenure, but I do genuinely feel there's a fatigue factor there now with Mayo supporters. They've been there for a decade, and they know deep down, and today proved it, that they're further away now than they have been for some time. And you're into a rebuild, but you've got to factor in as well today, lads, that it was very much, as I said earlier to somebody else, it was very much like, you know, the donkey and butt coming after the Lord Mayor's carriage. It really was, you know, it was an awful fall off. And then the weather, the rain, we had a really bad dose of rain, which made the pitch like a skating rink. Kerry were a mile off it in terms of where they needed to be, and Mayo just don't have the facility to get there anymore. And it was a very, very pale imitation of the first game. So, you know, curtain raiser, my arse.
There's not more so. Brian, I don't know if you've been in that situation or you guys have been in that situation, but sitting in change rooms waiting for a game that's supposed to be scheduled for an hour and 15 minutes earlier has a huge effect on lads.
I was just talking to Paul about that before we came on, and it does because, like, I recall when you're going to Croke Park, I'd have my headphones on, play my bit of music, getting yourself in the zone, and I had my routine when I got to Croke Park. I got my routine, found my spot. It's whatever it is about us with Kerry. It was a kind of a case of we were like cows coming in the evening. We all went to the same spot. Every fella sits in the same corner in any dressing room we go to, be it Tralee, Killarney, Parky Queeve, and Croke Park. You always had your spot, and when you go in there,
Who did you sit beside?
I always sat beside. Who sat beside me? I was in the corner. Donnie was alongside me. Donnie was in the just up alongside me. Yeah. So there was Donnie and a couple. There was one young fella. Jesus, who was this? Oh, Paul Ganey was sitting next to me. Paul Ganey, that's what it was. So, but again, it was just every fella had their spot. But I had my routine. Came in. You put on your bag. You pick up the program. Went out onto the field either to watch the last 5 minutes of the first game, either walk around the field maybe just to get a feel for it, just to see if it was wet or what way the wind was blowing, and that's it. We're back in. I got my ankles taped up, went into the warm-up area, just kept my ball handling right, just hand pass off the wall or meet with someone, and you were getting yourself ready for it. And all of a sudden you're told, right lads, game's going to take extra time. And you just have to come back down again because you can't keep going. You're building, and all of a sudden, right, and you have to come back down. And all of a sudden then you're kind of saying, right, what's left now? And you're kind of saying, okay, it's half time now of extra time. And all of a sudden you're trying to get yourself up for it again. And look, it does affect you. I suppose you haven't eaten since 2 hours prior to kick to throw in. That's another part that's there again. You're on about hydration. I was an awful fella for thinking, I drank too much water. I'm not going to be carrying around a full bladder with me. And this kind of stuff. I don't want to drink any more water. It does. It just, especially when you get your emotions so high and you're pumped up for it, and all of a sudden you have to come back down. It's just a massive high into a massive to a drop so quickly. And I even think it affected Kerry even last year against with the Tyrone, because they were training ready for an All-Ireland semi-final, and all of a sudden the game was cancelled and called off. So their week of training coming into where the game was supposed to be played, training would have been tapered. You wouldn't have been going hard at it because you were backing off, and all of a sudden then you had to try and get yourself back up again to go hard at it for a week in order then to taper off last week, and that just kind of puts you off kilter a small bit, you know what I mean? And yeah, look, as Oisín said there, it does throw you, and I just think even the atmosphere as well. I just think after the first game, sure, I was spent myself for the Kerry game. I was, after having that excitement of the first game, sure, the second game, you could nearly hear the players talking as well. Do you know what I mean? And I know a lot of the crowd had probably left as well, but at the same time, I think even the whole crowd were just fatigued as well, I think, after the first game.
Would the Armagh supporters have stayed on, Oisín, if they'd won?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't raining. Like
there was a lot,
shower, right?
Yeah, but a lot of people come back in. A lot of them are Armagh, but a lot of people actually come back in.
Yeah.
5 minutes into after the start of of that second game, so I would say there was a lot of people just sick and just went on home. I know my wee boys were on a bus. They were up playing in Whitehall all morning, so the bus was supposed to go straight after the Armagh match, so it was obviously delayed a couple of hours before it was home. But I think a lot of Armagh people would be that sick that they would maybe not go straight home. Tony, maybe not straight home. A lot of them would say it would still not be home, but yeah, they I would say they would have stayed. They would have been in better form to stay. If
were you impressed by Kerry, Oisín?
I was impressed by Kerry. I was impressed by certain things, to be honest. Like what can Kerry do? Just only keep passing the test that they're supposed to pass. They want to listen. They don't want to listen to me about ridiculing them about the fact that all I'm saying, all I keep saying is they're not way ahead of everybody else. Okay, Kerry can win All Ireland, of course they can. But they're not way ahead of everybody else, and like Mayo caused them loads of problems today. At different times, and they couldn't convert the chances. And look, that's what football's all about. It's about converting the chances. And no, I'm not going to go through a whole feast of Mayo inability in front of goal. There's no point because we've rehashed that 100 times, 1,000 times maybe. But Kerry did what they had to do. They did enough, and yet it feels as if it's still not enough. It just feels as if there should be so much more fluency to the way they play. Like the transition has to be better than it is. You can't keep coughing up the turnovers that they're coughing up.
Yeah.
When I say they can't, I don't know, because I'm like, maybe this championship is just that poor quality that you can do that. They could win in All Ireland, turning the ball over the way they do, but
not against a good team.
It is quite alarming, I think.
It is, because if you were playing at Dublin or if you were playing Armagh or Galway today and Kerry turned over the amount of ball they turned over cheaply, they would have been punished big time. And they just came up against a team in Mayo who, as we're always here talking about, don't convert their chances. Mayo had a period there today for 15 minutes in the second half, and I think they kicked 4 or 5 wides in the trot or dropped even 2 or 3 short.
4 scores out of 16 shots in the second half.
Yeah, it's like, look, as Oisín said, we don't want to be here repeating ourselves over and over because that's all we're doing with it. But that's their been their Achilles heel for the last couple of years is their conversion rate up front, and it's not anything to do with effort. And I think, as you turn around and say, I always say forwards is what they'll win you games. You know what I mean? We can have these defensive structures, but if you've got good forwards and to win an All Ireland, you've got to have forwards. We seen today with Galway. We said all their forwards kicked into, and you had to start there from 5 to 15. If we look at the Kerry forwards, I would say probably most of the Kerry forwards chipped in today. Well, I would say most of them, but again, they have the capability of kicking big scores. They can bring in good kickers off the bench in Killian Spillane and Tony Brosnan. But again, that's where just Mayo are at. And look, I agree with Oisín does. I think Kerry they needed that game today. It was a bad performance, but I still think it was a case of they just need to get that dirty petrol out of the system because they just didn't know where they were at. It was probably the first serious outfit they'd met since the league. And I wouldn't even say the league final. I would probably say Tyrone in the league in Killarney. Even though Kerry had qualified for the league already, league final, it was probably the most competitive game they've had. So now they've had that under the belt. They now know, okay, what it takes to get to what level to play inside in Croke Park. But they're still big areas to me. And I think one of the areas is the amount of ball Kerry turnover in the final third. I think some of the balls they kicked into David Moore or into David Clifford today were, I know the weather was bad, but they were balls that were up in there for a back to come through a fella. There was 1 or 2 of them on the ground. There was times where Gavin White just ran into cul-de-sacs and got turned over. Their efficiency up front is actually not good enough for me for the most times that they go into the opposition half.
And Brian, you know what's another point as well? The way, I mean, and you're obviously part of it. Like, I've heard from many people and coaches that have been involved in Kerry about the game smarts in that dressing room, like that there's massive game intelligence. And in fairness, like that's something that is credited towards Kerry teams, rightly or wrongly, and probably primarily rightly. I was stunned. Stunned is probably a strong word. I was very surprised today by the lack of game smarts in how the quality of ball, the type of ball that they were putting into. David Clifford actually injured. You could see after 10 minutes, he went backwards, he stood, he injured his ankle. And yet, I would say of the next 6 possessions that Kerry had, they put in these 4 or 5 50-50 balls, which were a defender's dream, to actually clean out David Clifford. Now, I'm not saying everything hinges on David Clifford, being fit, but he is their talisman. It's no coincidence that despite the fact that he was injured, A, he still was responsible for the game's key moment, and B, they still left him on the field for 60 odd minutes. What stupid balls they were putting into him. I mean, talk about compounding an injury situation with your key player. And there was so much of that today. I think you give them a pass because there is a lot of genuine reasons that they were as sloppy as they were today. But let's not get away from the fact that Kerry were extraordinarily sloppy. I have never seen Gavin White, and I think he's one of Kerry's best players, and I'm always singing his praises. I've never seen him make so many bad decisions in possession, turning into trouble, going down a sideline where there was no exit route, getting turned over time after time after time. I'm saying, Oisín, that has to be down to the fact, like Jack O'Connor came into the press room afterwards and was very pointed, and you could see the frustration in his face, because he actually even threw the question out to the reporters. Like, we're punished for winning a provincial final. That can't be right, lads, can it? Is what he said.
It's changed for next year.
And he mentioned, thanks be to God, that this is the last year of it, because like there was a lot of reasons that Kerry were as poor as they were today, but they were poor. And I think it was Bryan the last time we had this chat, and I didn't 100% agree with him, but I think you have to give it a little more credibility. You know, the goal opportunities and the goal chances, or sorry, the lack of them that Kerry are creating. So that's 23 points against Cork, 1 goal against Limerick, 1 goal today scored by you know who. Paul Gainey missed a glorious chance. I mean, that
played very well though.
He did play very well, and he bounced back from it. But you put yourselves in those situations where you say to yourself, be ruthless, lads. Get into the habit of being ruthless. I mean, I'm quoting Bryan practically now what he said in the show last time out. I just think they'll be pleased to get the game, but I wouldn't think that Jack O'Connor got everything out of the game that he was hoping to get out of it today.
No, I agree with you 100%, Tony. And like I even look at Tom Sullivan had a fantastic goal chance as well, threw it over the bar, and you can't just flick a switch, as I say, inside an All-Ireland semi-final that they're heading to now, and that's just going to happen. And that's both the worry I had in those other couple of games in the Munster Championship. If the goal chance comes, you just take it. You just be ruthless, and you can ease off at the end of the game, and you can start tipping the ball over the bar. And I think that's definitely going to be a concern from Kerry going forward, because you need goals to win games. No, the only plus side that Kerry haven't is that they're not conceding goals in the other. I think Mayo made one opportunity today for a goal chance to Kevin McLaughlin before halftime. You know, I think if that was a Ciaran O'Connor or someone a bit more composure there, just to probably maybe roll that ball on the ground or keep it low. But that's the only plus side that Kerry have at the moment, is they're not coffee up goal chances. But the game is going to come at the moment. If they concede a goal or they concede 2 goals, are they going to score enough on the other end, or score enough points?
I tell you, Brian, was the big worry for me. The big worry for me is that David Clifford would have done next to no training in recent weeks as he looked to recover from a calf problem. He's now going to do next to no training for the next 2 weeks as he looks to recover from an ankle injury. That's not good. You know, he's a big unit. He's never going to lose the football. But in terms of, we're only talking small percentage points. I don't know, Oisín, what you think on this, but like he has lost, I would say he has lost the better part of a month of physical hard training now. And he's going to be limping possibly even into an All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin. Like, they'll wheel him out there at this stage, irrespective of how they have to patch him up. But in terms of any training he's going to get done, I would say it's minimal.
It's minimal, and and like, you know, we're getting to the pitch of it now as well. And I think you get away with some of that stuff earlier on, but not now. Can Kerry win an All-Ireland without David Clifford?
I think they can. I actually think they can.
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I think they could.
I don't think so. But I'll tell you what I would do in the forward line. I don't think the balance in the forward line is right, and I think Paulie Clifford will be lucky to hold on. I think Tony Brosnan has to be in the equation. I'm not sure. Maybe you play Moynihan further into the goals, but the balance doesn't look right in the forward line to me.
I thought that at times Dave was very isolated. I thought at times he was the only forward insider, and I think that's why we were forced a lot of kicks into him, because he was the only fella insider. And Kerry will kick the ball. They will get the ball in. I'd like to see Paul maybe in the first half in particular. I thought he was too far from goal. No, to be honest, look, lads, Paulie Clifford, I thought he's been Kerry's best player up until today. I thought Lee Keegan, in fairness to him, he didn't get a sniff of Lee Keegan today. I think that's the respect that should be shown to Paulie, because he has been, for me, he is the fella that's dictating the games for the last couple of games. I know you can say they're against Cork and against Limerick, but he has been dictating the games. As I say, he is the fella that is supplying the bullets to David. And I've seen it with East Kerry. We've played East Kerry once or twice in the county championships. And yes, David gets the plaudits, but Paulie has just caused us the amount of damage he caused against us from coming from deep. He has a fantastic burst of pace. He's a fantastic passer. But in fairness today, Lee Keegan, just as Lee Keegan does, look, sure, he's one of the best defenders, one of the best footballers in the country. And in fairness to him, he didn't give him a sniff of today. I think Paul will, or Paddy Clifford will keep his place. I think what it'll come down to, and I think there's going to be a decision to be made. I thought David Moore was standing today for Kerry as well. For a fella that hasn't played football, missed all the league. I think he get a couple of minutes in the league final and got a couple of minutes here and there. I thought he kicked 2 points in play. I thought the work he did off the ball, tracking runners. There was a couple of times he went 50, 60, 70 yards to track a runner. I thought it was fantastic. And I thought he was a massive plus today. I wonder what's going to happen against Dublin, because when Fitzmaurice was in charge and when Peter was in charge, okay, Jack Barry, you're going on Fenton. You know what you're going to, or you're going on Brian Fenton. You take him out of the game and that's your job done. Does Dave come into the field? Is Jack Barry going to be fit enough to even play in 2 weeks' time? I think there's going to be a big call to be made there. Do you put Dermot O'Connor being forward? Dermot O'Connor wasn't at the races today. I thought he looked after today. But again, I just give him credit from the point of view of that he hasn't played football in a while, maybe, or just 4 weeks out and trying to get to the pitch of the game. So I think there's another decision to be made there for the semi-final.
I think David Clifford is a player that could play fresh. I think he's one of those players that can play fresh. It's just going down. It's going down. If that game goes to the wire, like the Tyrone game last year, and all of a sudden, you need him 10 minutes to go, and all of a sudden he's cramping up. I think that's your worry, Tony, as opposed to whether he can actually play and whether he can make an impact fresh. I think he can, no problem. But if that game goes down the stretch and there's nothing in the legs, there's no training done, then we're talking about that cramp situation again that so hurt him last year.
That's what I'm talking about, Oisín. Yeah. And the fact now that you have Adrian Spillane with a hamstring twinge, you have Jack Barry with a calf strain. I don't think Jack O'Connor expected David Moore until the last 70 minutes today, but he did, which was, as Brian says, was a big bonus. Absolutely. Like Dara Moynihan was okay only today. Stephen O'Brien was okay only today. There's a lot of issues up in the air all of a sudden. We were talking last week about Kerry side picking itself. Yeah. Now there's just a little bit of doubt into the mix with injuries and form and fellas coming back, and is that
Dublin have the same questions though?
And you're coming up against Paul's boys as well, so
you have to stop calling them Paul's boys.
Well,
I tip them to win. It doesn't mean I support them.
Oisín, at least we got to see, like last night again, we got to see who'll be marking David Clifford anyway. And, the hurling lad came on and just was given his little run around Croke Park just to get used to it for a fortnight's time.
Oh, he's more than. I don't think you should call him the little hurling lad. he looked like a fair operator on the football field when he came on.
I think he might need a wee bit more time in order to be given a job like that, though.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see that happening. I think he will play, but I don't think he'll play on David Clifford. If we look at Dublin, Brian, what did you think of Dublin on Saturday?
A bit like Kerry. To be honest, I think they cruised through the Lesser Championship, to be honest, and like that, I think there was just a case of getting the job done. They knew that Cork were going to be sticky, and it turned out that they were sticky in the first half. But again, they just upped the gear in the second half, and I suppose it was just get the cobwebs off, get enough to get over the line. There was nothing spectacular about it, but I just think they did what they had to do. They did what they had to do. They upped the gear in the second half, and they had to. I think Cork's fitness and physicality just showed that when Dublin went up the gear, they just hadn't the fitness, they hadn't the physicality to cope with them, and job done. And I just think they did it without James McCarthy and Conor Callaghan. And I think if you wear those two fellas back into the mix, the Dublin side, especially Conor, is just they're a different team with him in it. I think that focal point, I saw it against Kildare, just how good he was at winning ball, and just everything went through him, quick hands, going at his man. So, look, I think for Dublin, it was always just a case for Dublin getting through that game. Hopefully not pick you up an injury. I don't think they were ever going to lose the Cork. So, look, I just think that, again, a run out, get the cobwebs off and just get ready for Kerry.
It's kind of interesting. It's the game that people have been speaking about since the beginning of the championship, is Dublin and Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final. And both teams are entering with just massive question marks around them. And it feels like a really, really difficult game to call. And I noticed none of the three of you are rushing to answer that one.
No, I actually, the only question mark that I thought was over Kerry was rustiness and being undercooked. And funny enough for me, I think today just probably threw up a couple more questions. I think Dublin is very, I actually think probably the narrative from last night was actually more about Cork than Dublin. I mean, I think Dublin actually did exactly what everybody expected Dublin to do. And in the end, they put up 21 points. Kerry put up 118 today, which is the same thing. I think going into that game last night, it literally, and it doesn't often happen, let's face it, lads, that you actually predict a game and it actually turns out virtually exactly as you suggested it would, that Shawnee Powter would be Cork's best player, that they'd be competitive for 40 minutes, but in the end, then they'd run out of steam, Dublin would go up 2 gears, and they'd win by around 10 points. And that's, for once, exactly what did happen. From a Cork point of view, I just love to see what they do, what they use that, because that's the first time that they've been in Croke Park at that level for a few years now. And they have a lot of decent players to come back. And you'd say to yourself, in Division 2 next year, they'll kick on. And then, unfortunately, you look up the internet and you see who's in Division 2 next year. And you're saying, Christ on a bike. They've Dublin and they've Derry and they've Meath and they've the Roscommon. And, you're saying to yourself, you're not getting promoted out of that next year. Mm-hmm. So, it's a big ask for Cork. But you're right, Paul. It's usually we'd look forward to Dublin and Kerry as kind of this super fight, this kind of clash of the heavyweights, and they're both coming with a big punch. And I don't think either of them are actually coming in this time with a big punch. But if you remember, Brian was playing. Brian, remember the old start of the earwigs? What year was that? 2009, was it?
Yeah.
At Gilroy. Yeah. And Kerry came in with a shitload, excuse my language, of question marks over them that year. I remember you'd barely got over Sligo.
Missed Sligo, missed the penalty, that's right, yeah.
Yeah,
barely got over Antrim.
Yeah, that's right. They struggled with Antrim. That was in Tullamore, I think, actually.
They found something in the last 15 minutes that day, though.
Yeah, they did. And then all of a sudden they arrived and they played Dublin. And, I'm not saying I know it is a very, very different Dublin now, but
we're going to preview. We're going to preview.
Was that a bank holiday Monday game?
Could have been.
I think it was, because I think I remember I promised the wife to take her to Dublin, and I ended up watching it in through the window of a Panasonic TV.
The romance of it.
I think I spent an hour and 20 odd minutes staring into
looking the window.
Yeah, I digress. Sorry.
If we're gonna preview that game next weekend, we're going to talk about the matchups. We're going to kind of make a plan for each team as to how they might defeat the other. But before we finish today, we have to talk about what was the best performance of the weekend, and that was by Derry, who dismantled Clare in a game that was essentially over by half-time. Oisín, were you impressed with Derry?
Yeah, I was impressed with Derry. I was impressed with everything about them. And I think Derry sort of bring the same thing to the table every week, but they seem to be able to add something as well. And I think it was obvious that they had highlighted the fact that, they were going to any half goal opportunity, and that's the way it's been. And if I go back to last year when they narrowly missed out against Donegal, they missed 3 crucial goal chances. And since that, they've been exceptional in front of goal in the way that they've finished off the moves that they've started. They're not perfect. I think you can get at them. I think even Clare proved that. You can get round the back in them sometimes. I think the fact that Christian McKeag is so intent on his man, sometimes he's that intent on following his man that he misses sort of what's going on behind him. But I think Derry are going along very nicely, and I think that Derry looked at the quarterfinals. I might have said this to you last week, but Derry looked at the quarterfinals and went, "Well, hold on a second, let's reevaluate everything here. We wanted an Ulster title, but are we really that far away from winning an All Ireland? And I think, having seen what they've seen at the weekend, they'll say that'll give them even more encouragement, and they'll be happy with the way they're set up, and they'll be very happy with the form of Conor Glass in the middle of the field. And again, McGuigan was good, very good. The big players were very good, but so was the like of Paul Cassidy, Shea Downey, McCluskey, who never gets a mention from cornerback. I thought he was exceptional.
He was brilliant. He was brilliant.
Serious pace. So some of the players on the periphery, you know, Benny Hearn, who would have took a little bit of stick, has now become a cult hero in Derry. They call him the GOAT, I think now. In fact, there was Derry supporters with a goat, a picture of a goat and Benny Hearn's head on top of it. So I don't even know if that's sacrilege or something. You might be able to tell me that, Paul. But he players like him have really upped a notch. And I think even what they're bringing off the bench, we mentioned about the boys that they brought off the bench, the final, they've gained a little bit more. Seem to be constantly on the rise and seem to be bringing something a little bit different. Something, the same thing, that there's an expectancy of what they're going to bring, but there's always one other layer to what they're doing. And I actually don't think, I think if all the teams are looking at them, nobody's really going to fancy playing them, I don't think.
No. What did you think of them, Brian?
To be honest, I didn't see the full game. I was travelling up at the time, but I watched it back. And it was just one of those games that Clare needed to get to start. That Derry did. They needed to get on the front foot and get a couple of goals, or get a goal at least. But look, it started off and the game was over. It was like they took Clare the 26 minutes before they got their first point from play, was it? Look, it's just one of those games that, to be honest, I think there's a massive gulf between the two teams. I think we speak about Clare being Division 2. Either they're lucky to be in Division 2 or maybe Derry should be up in Division 1. I think that's the difference there. I think Derry probably were the one team that improved so much from the provincial finals. From the provincial final, I think they kicked on a gear. I think now again you probably have to take into account the opposition being Clare, but I definitely think there was a vast improvement in their game. I think they've actually brought another level to their game from the Ulster final, attacking wise. Now again, playing Donegal, there was a different tactic involved in the game, but I think they won't fear Galway for 1 minute. And I think if they could, they could find themselves in an All Ireland final very quickly, and they could be facing a Dublin or a Kerry that would still have question marks over them. But I actually think, to be honest with you, I think there's going to be two cracking semi-finals. I think there's Galway and Derry both set up very similarly. Both are very defensive-minded, both have the firepower to clock up scores. So I think that's going to be an absolutely cracking game, and obviously the Kerry Dublin will be a cracking game too. But look, I was impressed with Derry, but at the same time, I just think a bit of caution as to the opposition they were playing as well.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of Derry over the last 18 months. I've watched a lot of their videos. I saw them play live twice against Offaly, and I really fancied them against Clare. And I kind of said beforehand that I thought it was.
Well, you did. You said they'd win easy. Why did you say
that? Because I don't think they're quite as defensive as people think they are. And now I know I saw them against Offaly, and they knew they had Offaly's measure. But I think if anybody wants to examine Derry's patterns of play when they're on the ball, they should watch the video of the league final last year, the Division 3 league final, where Derry dismantled Offaly, won by 13, 14 points, but could have won by way more than that. Or watch the league game in Tullamore, where Derry, playing into the wind in O'Connor Park in the second half, left 4 forwards up the field and just said, we know we're better than you, we're going to play through you. And they played they just controlled the entire game, ran the game as they wished. And I think they have a lot of good footballers, as well as having a good structure, and they're incredibly fit. So part of it is they are so conditioned.
The conditioning is off the charts, lads.
Yeah. It's unreal. If there's an example of what can be done and obviously lockdown was very judiciously used in Derry to get us fit there. So I think that really matters. But also, I've nothing but regard for Clare football in what they've done over time. But I think Clare were very fortunate. I think Roscommon will. The Roscommon footballers played against Clare that day. They will not forget that loss. They will remember that loss for years and how they managed to lose it. That game was done and they blew up. I think that's the Clare team that lost to Limerick in the Munster Championship. So I think there's a gulf there in that, allowing for allowing for that Clare stayed at it. So I think it was partly Clare getting to where they did, and partly Derry they're a better footballing team than they're given credit for. Tony.
Can I ask one question, Avi? Which I'm just looking at our paper. I'm looking at the front page of our sports section here, and the other screen, and a few things. And it's a picture of the alleged eye gouge at the end of the Galway Armagh game. Do you think that the first game will be remembered as a classic, or it will be remembered as something grotesque because what happened at the end of normal time?
Oh, it'd be a classic. Like that, like there's going to be a furore about the row, and the row will always be as part of it. But for people who were at the game anyway, can't talk about telly, but for people who were at the game anyway, will remember it as a fantastic occasion, in my view.
I think, that's a good point for anybody who was at the game, but I think there was only 70,000 at the game. There's a couple of million people who are going to view that and just go, I'm just going to use it as a stick to beat us with. It's ugly, it's disgusting, it's disgraceful, it's, you name it. It's just...
Yeah, it was, you called it yourself, Oisín. I look back at what you said about it. It's not, I admire you for saying it, because it's not usually what people say about things that their own county have been involved in.
But I think it deserved it. I think that the one thing that I don't want to see is, like, I don't want to see that in the game. Like, even Geezer, when he was doing his interview, said he doesn't want to be associated with that, and you don't. I don't think any of us want to be associated with that stuff anymore. And I think the eye gouge for Tiernan Kelly was a mistake on his part. But like, I don't really want to see him. Like, I know already, from chatting to a few people, that he knows the mistake that he made. I think he deserves a severe punishment for it, but a punishment that's meted out by the GA and not by the general public.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like lads running around the internet with pitchforks isn't going to improve anyone's life at this stage.
I just think one thing on this, and it's nothing to do with, well, it has to do with that, but I just think, Tony, you made a point about this, about the two teams in the Cork County when the Park of Cueve was being built. Like, at this day and age now, you've two off the dressing rooms. Why can't one team tug out in the Hogan stand and the other team tug out in the Cusick stand? So you have, either way, in the first game, you would have one team in the Hogan stand, one team in the Cusick, and for the second game, you would have one team in the Cusick, one team in the Hogan. And it's, number one, you have two different teams going into two different dressing rooms or two different tunnels. You avoid all that. The second thing I would think about this, and it's something I think the GA needs to seriously look at, is the penalty for the crime. How many red card offences have been involved in both football and hurling this year, where the CCC have been involved and they've been overturned? I think there is no consequence. I think the consequences for these actions have to be proper. I don't think they can turn around and be questioned or appealed. And, from the point of view of, that's a serious offence. I go, like, do you know what I mean? I don't want to try and make it sound as if and be sounding dramatic about it, but that's a serious offence. You could lose an eye with something like that. Could you imagine Jamie Comer missing an All-Ireland semi-final because of that, or whatever happened? And I think there has to be punishment for it. And I even go back to, and not just even that incident, but other incidents where we've had these fracas in the sidelines. You know, there was one I think with Armagh and Donegal this year as well. There was, look, it happens other times. There was Dublin and Tyrone, I think, a couple of years ago above in Norma. We had one with Tyrone ourselves above in Norma a couple of years ago as well. And I think in order to stop that, I think they have to start punishing people. I think that the punishments have to be there to deter from happening. And I think they went about it from the point of view of even the Armagh Tyrone game, where there was a couple of red cards. Again, a lot of them went to the CCC. They were appealed. Where's the consistency that's in this? For me, there has to be a consistency. If you want to clamp down on this kind of stuff, the only way you clamp down is by making the punishment fit the crime and not allowing people to go in and appeal these things and get them overturned because it's making a mockery of the CCC. And I just think that, for me, if they want to clamp this out of us, there has to be a punishment and draw the line. Now, I genuinely feel sorry for the two boys that got sent off. Who was it? There was
Sean Kelly. For contributing to a melee.
But contributing to a melee, you could have sent off 12 or 13 fellas on each side for contributing to a melee. How you can pick out those two fellas for that incident where there were so many involved, I just don't know.
Was it a coincidence that they were the captains?
That's the question. So that's the question. What decision was made?
Are those captains supposed to be able to control their players? All 30 field?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question.
Is this a way of trying to deter this stuff? I don't know. I just found it. We trawled. I was in RT today, and we trawled through like all of the footage, and like you couldn't pick. In fact, if I was gonna pick Sean Kelly out for anything, it was trying to sort the thing out.
Yeah, he went blue helmet on by the look of it, going around trying to stop.
Yeah, and in fairness, I watched the Sunday game this evening, and they were the same way. They highlighted the two players. They said here they weren't stuck in, they weren't rolling on the ground. They didn't have people in headlocks. They were genuinely trying to break it up, and they were two fellas that were picked out for it. So, like, I know I'm contradicting myself here, but I think those two fellas that were pinned out, there was no crime committed by them from that point of view. To miss an All-Ireland semi-final, I think it'd be crazy over that. But I'm speaking about the eye gouging incident. I think the punishment has to fit the crime there. I think he has to learn a lesson that if this happens again, or anyone for that matter that does that, will know the penalty that they're going to suffer for us. And I think it'll deter an awful lot of that stuff happening again. And I just think it's about time the GA clamp down on this kind of stuff and make an example of someone. It has to be someone. It has to start somewhere. But it will deter people from doing this down the line again.
Yeah. And I don't think it's not the worst, obviously, incident by far that we've seen in a high profile game. But I do think, in fact, I'd lay a wager at this stage that it'll be the last time in a big game we'll see two teams going down the same tunnel. I'm making that prediction right now that they're not going to allow that happen again. There are more, Brian and Oisín, you know better than me. Yeah. I'm sure I'm right in saying there are more than just two dressing rooms on the Hogan stand side. So there had to be the facility to put them on opposite sides. You just cannot have two teams in any scenario, not mind an explosive situation at the end of normal time like we had this afternoon, going down the steps next to each other. I'm betting that won't be seen again.
Yeah. I for what it's worth, I don't think anybody should have been sent off after it. I think the ref should have just said, I'm going to let the GA sort this out afterwards. I think let them pick the footage, pick whoever they're going to deal with afterwards. But I'm not going to pick out two players because there were too many involved. I think it would have been a more prudent way of doing it. I want to finish with one last question. Do you think it's acceptable, any of you, that the All-Ireland semi-finals should be decided on a penalty shootout? Would you be happy for Kerry to lose to Dublin, or Dublin to beat Kerry, or Kerry to beat Dublin on a penalty shootout, or similarly Derry Galway?
I don't think so. I think it's just a cruel way to go to the game. Do you know what I mean? And the one reason I can see why it's in there at the moment is purely because of a fixture. Is because of the fixtures. If you're telling me that you can't leave an extra week in between a quarterfinal and an extra week in between a semi-final and final to allow a replay. So allow a replay a week after it's only 3 weeks between the quarterfinal, semi-final, and 3 weeks between the final. It's only 2 extra weeks in the calendar year. I'm surely they can find it to fit in a replay. And like what we wouldn't give to be going back to Croke Park again next weekend to watch that game. I think it's crazy. I think it's only purely just down to the fixture list. I think it's the reason why it's there. I can't explain any other reason why it is.
Tony?
Well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt on the fixture list, and let's challenge them to come up with a more creative solution other than penalties, i.e. if you even have to go for an extra 5 minutes, or if you even have to go for a golden score, I'd still rather win a game by someone having, to get the last score in open play than actually go to penalties. And I know Oisín has yet to come in, but I'll burst, Paul, if I don't get to say, would we please, if we're going to rob one idea from English football or from association football or soccer or whatever we want to call it, then can it please be the referee's white snow can to spray on the ground to stop players stealing ridiculous amounts of meters at this stage for free and marks? It's gone beyond.
These two lads here were two of the kings of it.
Oh, no,
Sheehan
was
Bryan Sheehan had the
ridiculous.
longest arms I've ever seen of a
Hold on
fella
a second.
passing the ball
I used
forward.
to take the ball back.
I kicked him off the ground.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
How am I
Used to reach
stealing yards?
forward.
Yeah.
Inspector Gadget arms.
Bryan Sheehan is the innocent party. Oisín McConville is guilty as charged. But compared to Oisín, compared to the fellas now, you were only in the tuppence halfpenny place. These guys are stealing like 8, 10, 12 meters.
Absolutely.
Would we just ever just get the spray can, put it down in the pitch and say that's where the kick is from? It's going to become, lads, a massive issue in a massive final one day where a referee is actually going to call someone up and say, you can't do that. It decided the game, and then it'll be retaken and he'll miss it and there'll be a big song and dance about it. Let's get in there first and do the right thing. But on the penalties, absolutely not. I'm not a penalty person. Oisín.
Yeah, no, I didn't think it added anything to the occasion today. And I think initially maybe when people dreamt this up, they thought, oh, this lad's serious drama, and they're thinking about the penalty shootouts they've seen and, in previous years and big soccer matches and all that sort of thing. So I don't think it adds anything to the game. I think it's you get me when I'm emotionally at my all-time low. But it's a horrible way to lose. But I actually talked to a few Galway people, and they didn't think it was a particularly great way to win either. So, I mean, there you go. I think that's your answer. And seeing as Paul, are you granting wishes tonight? Or, because Tony wants the spray can. Can we please get rid of the forward mark as well? It's a
disaster.
Absolutely.
Kerry's first point today actually was a kick out, mark caught in midfield, fair enough. But then a long ball through to David Clifford and a tap over point. And he could have turned and gone at that game. It was a different match.
But imagine the skill involved in catching a ball with nobody near you.
Yeah.
And getting rewarded for that. It's fucking ridiculous, lads.
Yeah, there was a score in the second half where he won a ball, and I think he was going to play on, and the ref blew the whistle.
That's right.
To indicate the mark, and then Dave decided, oh yeah, like you're giving one of the best kickers in the country a free opportunity to have a kick at the post because he caught the ball over a 40-yard kick. Like, I just think I'd keep it for the kick outs.
Yes, I agree.
I think it adds to it. I think it adds to it rather than allowing a fella to go catch your ball and come down and be swamped and not being able to offload us. I think it would just encourage.
I wonder how good it would be if we got rid of both, though.
Just for the outcry.
No, but just to see, that we're very structured in everything we do. Now there's loads of structure about everything in the game. And I wonder, would that create that little bit more chaos? Just wonder, because that's what we're crying out for at the end of the day. You love that game today, sure it was chaos. You love when Mayo, went all out to try and, topple teams in the past and try and beat that brilliant Dublin team and the Kerrys, and you love that stuff. But yet you won't let go of these couple of things that could bring us back to that point.
How long is it going to take you to get over this, Oisín?
I just think it's the same thing.
I think I'm thinking a week it could be like back on sort of like a fairly level playing field. No, it does take a bit of time. And Armagh people were invested in it. I think that's the thing, heavily invested in it, and we will get the Mickey taken out of us for the fact that we got so invested and ended up going out in the quarterfinal. But that's how far off we've been, and but I do think that the challenge is sustainable. So hopefully we'll be back in next year.
When we started recording this podcast, it was Sunday night. It's now into Monday morning, and thank you, Oisín, for coming in. I know it hasn't been not straightforward after you lose a match like that, but it's thank you for staying on. And to Bryan and to Tony, the Kerry dream lives on onwards to 2 weeks' time. We'll talk about that in a fortnight. Thank you to Larry Ryan for running this podcast, to Raf Rocca, to Jack Neville, and to everyone at Examiner Sport. Thanks to Renault for their continuing support. Bemidj Hernash Galua.
You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for late night.
A grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lad.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.